Welcome to the 75th reading of my memoir, The Innocence of Guilt. I become dissatisfied and lonely. The Inner Peace Movement meeting proved so interesting. Information about spiritual guides, positive and negative energies, and how to make good things happen in your life. Our spiritual guides were people who had passed over, dead people, yet could still hang around to help us out from time to time. The more troubles we had in this life to overcome, the more guides were attached to us. I imagined a whole army waiting to serve me. Over the course of that year and most of the next, we attended meetings and workshops involving the dubious yet fascinating activities of psychometry and levitation. Other times we sat around in a group and sent love vibes towards each other through our extended healing hands. As comforting as these sessions often were, they did little to alleviate my persistent obsessions and anxieties. Spotters stood around the periphery of the circle, aimed at dispelling negative energies, and I knew I upset the balance of the group by struggling with disturbing thoughts whilst attempting to grasp hold of peace. As the spotter announced a negative spirit in the room, I broke out in a sweat, fearing I would be identified and shamed. I kept all this to myself, same old pattern of secrecy. One of the first exercises any new recruit engaged in involved a personal psychic reading, where we discovered any negative spirits attached to us and contacted our guides for the first time. When I went for mine, fear encompassed me as I imagined dozens of negative spirits whirling around my soul. The person doing the reading would certainly think less of me as a result. The moment I walked into Sasha's room, my eyes were drawn to a large poster on the wall. It read, "Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life." When I asked him about it, he said he still considered himself a Christian, although he didn't attend a church. The poster calmed me. I clung to the belief that as long as it was on the wall, no harm could come to me. Surprisingly, no negative spirits laid claim to me, and the reading gave me 6 or 7 guides I could consult. Getting in touch with guides involved much practice. Mine would be in touch by a subtle movement of my left shoulder. Sasha told me that certain periods of my life had been fraught with traumas of some kind, no surprise to me. A series of blips on the highway of life, so to speak. And if I addressed them instead of running away, I would gain victory. The Inner Peace Movement didn't baby anyone. You did the work yourself, something I usually avoided. At one of the meetings, we all stood in a circle, passing love around. Each person said, "I love you," to the person on their right. Sasha looked at me with gentleness in his eyes and said the 3 little words. The next day, I couldn't erase those words from my mind. I started in on the torturous, repetitive rituals, wondering if he loved me in an Inner Peace Movement way, or in the only other way I knew of. No idea what to do with the conflicting emotions surging through me. Every time we went to meetings, I watched Sasha to see if he showed any telltale signs of being romantically attracted to me. From early adolescence, I'd perceived myself as primarily a sexual object. As soon as I became aware of being attracted to the opposite sex, I sought love and acceptance via that channel, tried to find and define myself in that vein. My close adult relationships had all been with the opposite sex. I don't believe I understood love, other than the sexual kind. I hadn't sensed it from my parents or from any relationships with girlfriends. Even the ones hinting at promise existed only because of my jealous grasping for them. Most of the relationships were far from pure because of my desperate need. Sasha often called me when Brian was away, purely out of concern. I knew he planned to sail around the world, and stupidly I imagined myself going with him, throwing everything away for an outlandish adventure. He hadn't invited me or made any passes at me, but his calm, soothing, inquiring voice late at night over the phone left me with mixed emotions. I wondered what I might do one night if instead of a phone call he showed up at my door. Luckily for me, he didn't, and gradually my obsession with him dissipated. Through the group, Brian and I made friends with a clairvoyant who invited us to his house. One day he saw an elderly man sitting beside me on the sofa, dressed in either a monk's habit or a priest's robe. The man seemed to want to protect me, so I had no need to be frightened, he said, but it did disturb me. Brian switched companies at the beginning of the year, hoping to cut down on the constant travelling, which he knew bothered me, but the travel continued. In fact, it became more frequent. 2 months away and 2 weeks at home. His suitcase stayed packed by the front door in readiness for the next phone call. He wasn't fazed by the irregularity of our life as he loved his job. Towards the end of the year, though, I tired of the loneliness of it from my perspective. I despised the location of my dream house and the perceived snootiness of the people who lived in the complex. The condos were mostly owned by young professional couples actively pursuing separate careers. They left early in the morning and returned in the evening, staying behind their drawn curtains. The few families present appeared to want little to do with 2 transplanted English people who drove a little Toyota, had 2 rambunctious children, and a pet rabbit that persistently escaped from its pen to hop all over their flower beds. I would have given anything to be back in the friendly, gossip-filled atmosphere of the apartments. Brian and I were drifting apart. When he came home, I resented handing over the family reins to him as if I wasn't capable. I had learnt to do it all by myself, out of necessity. Gradually, without realizing it, I ran on a completely different schedule to him. I constantly complained, and one day I asked him if this life of ours was going to continue. "What do you mean, this life of ours?" "You being gone all the time." "I don't know what you have to complain about. You get a big fat check in the mail every month, don't you? What more could you possibly want?" "I didn't marry a big fat check." "Well, you'll have to get used to it because it isn't going to change." "I don't think I can put up with it anymore. I think you need to choose between your family or your job." "Well, if that's an ultimatum, I choose my job." And with that statement, he angrily went up the stairs to bed. I guess my marriage is over. But the following morning, he acted more subdued. "I've changed my mind. I'm going to look for another job where I can be at home more often," he announced. Hope welled up inside me. I often thought of the days in our small flat in Chelsea, our contentment with so little. I'd have given anything sometimes to have those days back. With no shortage of money, all I seemed to do was leaf through Eaton's catalogue looking for stuff we didn't need. None of it brought me fulfillment. All this was difficult for Brian to accept. My dissatisfaction with the affluence he'd provided for us was thrown in his face, so to speak. The North American way of life had crept up on us, and so much was within our reach, except what we needed most: togetherness. The only type of job in his line of work where he wouldn't have to travel was at a university. At least he'd gained 4 years of practical consulting experience. That would help him find something. It's true he didn't want to leave his beloved Vancouver, although I stated that he hardly stayed home to enjoy it. I didn't have the same attachment to the city or any of its surrounding scenic beauty. For me, it would always conjure up loneliness and isolation. Luck, or as we said later, possibly protection by someone or something from a realm other than what we'd been moving in, chanced on us not long after Brian made the decision to leave consulting. He acquired a position as Professor of Mining Engineering at the University of Alberta. So we were leaving Vancouver, but first we flew to Edmonton to buy a house. Karen would be entering grade 1 when we settled there, and I didn't want us stuck in an apartment in limbo. I wanted us to put our roots down in the neighbourhood we were meant for. Maybe it wasn't too late to give our children a sense of stability. Sometimes I feared that my father's legacy of moving from one place to another had attached itself to my family, and all the old insecurities connected with it were now dogging the 4 of us. I couldn't let that continue. We took Karen and Gary with us on the search for our new home, and once in Edmonton we found the perfect house in the southwest area of the city near the university, 5128 123rd Street, in an area commonly known as the Professor's Ghetto because of the large number of university staff who occupied the houses. A stucco-covered ranch-style bungalow with impressive floor-to-ceiling windows letting in plentiful rays of sunlight. We eagerly flew back to Vancouver and set ourselves to selling the condo and packing up for our move. We had renewed hope for our marriage and looked forward to a more settled family life. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment on this reading, and hopefully you will tune in to the next one. Bye for now.